Rik Offenberger, and this is the Mighty Crusaders panel for Comic-Con at Home. I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves to you real quick. We're going to talk about the Mighty Crusaders for the next hour, and we appreciate you joining us. Jason?
My name is Jason Contini. Thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun.
Jeff?
Hi, I'm JC Vaughn. I'm the Vice President of Publishing for Gemstone Publishing, the home of the Overstreet Comic Book Press Guide. I'm also a comic book creator and a big Crusaders fan.
And Paul?
I'm Paul Castiglia. I'm a comic book writer, editor, and historian. Worked for many years for Archie Comics. Co-wrote the MLJ companion book with Rik Offenberger and John B. Cook. And here we are talking about our favorite topic, the Mighty Crusaders.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We're real excited about the Mighty Crusaders in general. And, there's been a lot going on. As you're watching this panel, Archie has just released the latest version of the Mighty Crusaders. Don't have the actual cover yet, but this is the Comic Shop News version. And it went on sale June 30th. So as you're watching this, you could go to the stands and actually see it. Mighty Crusaders have a long history. They've been publishing for over 80 years at Archie, on and off. It's not been continuous as DC has with Superman and Batman, but a lot of fits and starts. But you do have to appreciate that, for 80 years nonstop, every single decade, they've had a version of the Mighty Crusaders come out. This latest version I was looking forward to. It had a high-profile creator with Rob Liefeld. There was a lot of hoopla coming out about this series. It was going to be a mini-series of 4 issues. And so I was really looking forward to it, and I still am. By the time you've seen this, I will have seen the comic, but at the moment, we can just speculate. What are your thoughts on the new series, anyone?
I grew up reading comics in the late 80s and early 90s, so I've always been a fan of Rob's work, and any time that you can get somebody high profile like that on the Mighty Crusaders, I'm all for it. So I was very excited, despite the fact that I've been spending the last few years trying to work on a proposal to send to Archie on my own anyway, but that's neither here nor there. I was very excited for it, and I still am. Even despite everything else, I'm still looking very forward to reading it.
Cool. I think that at least for my group, the high water mark for the Mighty Crusaders was the Red Circle version, and they had a lot of high-profile creators work on the series, and that's exactly when I got really into the characters. And as you can see, if you see Paul's background, that's exactly his background here. But Paul's ducking without talking, so it's not looking over to his section.
Yeah, that was my introduction as well. Actually, it's tied into my story of breaking into comics. If anybody wants to hear that story again. But I had gone to school of visual arts. I studied animation and cartooning. I graduated and I realized I didn't really have a handle on perspective, anatomy, or composition, which I would have needed to be a comic book artist. But, I knew how to create stories. I knew how to draw well enough to draw thumbnails. So my goal was to get, writing work and editing work. So I was just doing all this research that I could do on local companies out in New York. And I was in this comic shop. Well, actually, it started with a digest. There was a literacy ad in a digest with all these heroes. I'm like, who are these superheroes? I don't see them in the Archie comics, but there they are in this literacy ad. And then somewhere in Long Island, New York, I found a store that had all these back issues. And there were all these Mighty Crusaders comics, and they were the ones that Rik just mentioned. They were the 1980s Red Circle comics. And I bought them all up. And I was like, I like these characters. They just struck me. I liked the way they looked. I liked the way they were drawn. I liked the stories. And I knew they weren't like on a level of maybe the same type of depth that you would get in a Marvel or some of the better DC ones. But I just liked them. Like there was an instant draw towards them. And that's how I got into them too, with the 80s Red Circle line.
Yeah. As we're getting older, we're running into more and more fans that really got into them through the Impact years. That was another real big push.
That's absolutely the case. And while I remember the when I was working at Lone Star Comics, I remember when the Red Circle stuff was coming out, and particularly the early issues of it, where it was a real introduction of the characters to me. But I've got to say, my favorite take on Black Hood, for instance, though I really like the Dark Circle version that came out a couple of years ago. I mean, a lot. I think the Impact line Black Hood, which was Mark Wheatley writing and mainly Rick Burchett on art, just killer stuff. I mean, it's a built-in TV series if anybody wanted to do it. It's genius level stuff in terms of setup.
Yeah, the Impact stuff, that's where I got into the Crusaders and instantly fell in love with all of it, and immediately started hunting down everything that had come before. But yeah, I think the Black Hood, I think you're right, that Black Hood take in the Impact run, I mean, the possibilities of what you can do are really endless. It's a shame that, you know, the Impact line ended the way it did, because you could have done so much with just that character alone.
Yeah, I've talked to Mark about that extensively over the years, because every time that there's a new person at Archie, I try and get them to do a trade paperback collection of that stuff. Because I apparently, judging by my collection, every time I stumble across a set in somebody's store, I buy it. Because they're not expensive, and they're great storytelling. They're very inventive. And there's just a lot of cool stuff in the Impact line. But to me, that I just look at that and I'm just every time I see it, I think, like I was saying before I started rambling, Mark had it plotted for another few years. And
that would be nice to see.
Yeah. So
the Impact stuff, I liked that each artist took a different approach, and even the stories too. You know, I was big Mike Parabek fan.
Oh yeah,
I love Mike Parabek. So all his stuff on the fly, I love. And I was working on staff at Archie at the time, so we were getting, you know, tons of free copies of those were being shipped over from DC. So it was great to see those. It's kind of weird. I came in at an intersection because I started working at Archie in 1990, first as an assistant editor to Scott Fulop, and he had all the Spectrum stuff lying around. He had like Xeroxes of pencils of things, stuff that people still haven't seen. There's still a few things people haven't seen that I've got to see, and it's wild stuff. And then all of a sudden it's the Impact line, and it's just been through so many permutations. And you know, I love that about it. You know, you can't do that with every character, but with these you can. They're kind of like an open canvas, which I like. You know, if you think about superheroes, you know, Batman they do billions of versions of, but they don't do that with every character, you know. So my Crusaders are kind of in that realm.
With the Spectrum line, that it was the original time they were going to try and get Rob Liefeld to do the Shield. I know it didn't get a ton of traction, but in our book we have an image from Rob sketching the Shield for. It wasn't, the image we have wasn't actually connected to the pitch, but it is still the first time we see a sketch from Rob of the Shield.
And since you guys are authoritative but too humble to do this, let me say that anybody that's vaguely interested in this subject should get your book. It is a wonderful education into this subject, and it is done with not only a lot of love but a lot of professional detail, which the two don't usually mix when we turn into being fans. And you guys managed to do that very, very well.
You beat me to it. I was just about to jump in and do that book is in my opinion the Bible on these characters.
And it's also a model for anybody that wants to take on any of the topics of superheroes that could be bigger. You know, and you guys just unearthed so much stuff in there, and it doesn't feel rushed, and it does that great thing of leaving you wanting more, and you suddenly care about the characters more than you did before when you're done reading it. And I mean, to me, that's the job of a book like that. And you guys killed it.
Well, thank you for the plug.
And John too. We have to mention John as well.
Yes,
because
I absolutely, and it's not like John's work is ever
John
ever
came in,
far from me.
A whole bunch of material. Yeah, we had a whole bunch of material, but we were so close to it that we weren't recognizing where there were still some holes.
Yeah.
And John plugged all the holes brilliantly. I mean, he came in and he added so much stuff that we didn't have that was vital to it. So it really was this conglomeration of everything. And now I'm sitting here thinking as we speak, it's not even, the story's not even finished yet. So
well,
we might have to go back and revise it someday.
Paul, I gotta say, first off, that's being a good writer and marketing person, because you've left room for your updated version or your sequel or whatever.
Well, they keep making new versions of the characters.
and that's the great thing about this, is that you guys, in your own way, by contributing to the knowledge base, contribute to the fire that some young fan coming in now can get, and then be the guy who wants to reinvent these guys again 20 years from now.
You know, they've done a lot of different versions of these characters, and there's a negative backlash towards the Mighty Comics version that you see sometimes. They say, oh, they were trying to be Marvel, oh, they were trying to copy the DC Batman TV series with Adam West. But people who lend to that persuasion don't really understand the characters of the history, because the Mighty version of the characters predate the Batman TV show. So they weren't trying to copy the Batman TV show. Technically, the Batman TV show was coming along and using the same method that they were using. Archie had called them high camp characters, and they were using a type of comedy called camp comedy, where the characters took themselves overly seriously and played it really stiff, although it was humorous. And Archie was a humor publication. They had already done the characters seriously, competing with DC and Marvel in the 40s successfully. And then they relaunched in the 50s with a serious version with Simon and Kirby doing The Fly and Private Strong as the Shield. And as that was going, I mean, The Fly was ongoing. They changed up the way they were presenting the character as a humor character to fit in with the other stories they did. As the #3 publisher, they were, I mean, it's like, DC was vanilla and Marvel was chocolate, and they're trying to present strawberry as an alternative. And if you were a fan of that time period, you got to see a different take on superheroes. And I think that's really what they've done in every incarnation. It's always been slightly different to try and find a different niche for themselves.
What's interesting? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
The zeitgeist, I think, at the time in the early 60s, it was the James Bond period. And so the James Bond films, they spawned a whole bunch of comedic, parodies that you had in like Flint movies and things like that, that were almost like more comedic versions of Bond. So I think that camp thing was in the air anyway. And it's just one of those kind of things where it's like parallel development, I think, where you have these Mighty Comics coming out and keying in on that around the same time that the Batman show is being developed. I think it was just in the air, and it worked for the time. And certainly now you can find people who will say, you know what, that version of the web might actually be the most interesting version of the web. The web in the 1940s was grim comic series. It really was. I mean, you talk about grim and gritty comics. People think grim and gritty was invented in the 1980s. It was invented in the 1940s. But the version of the henpecked hero in the 60s, people look at that now and are like, that's cool. I'd like to see a movie of that, or a TV show, or some of these things aren't just always just written off as camp or not worthy. And I think it's a good time to reassess those, because the Batman 66 got reassessed over the last few years, and now it's embraced more. And you got to take these things for what they are, not for what they're not.
I think that's that's a great statement. I grew up with, my parents just loved the Batman TV series. They thought it was hysterical. I at the same time was loving the very serious portrayal of Batman in the comics. I never had a disconnect with it. I know that in general, comic fans were just righteously indignant about the Batman TV show. We just loved it, you know? And so I think there's plenty of room for different takes. And I think the Crusaders history proves that. And in fact, I wonder if you guys think really the success of Archie, the character, is the only thing that torpedoed the original era of these guys. We might be, if they had continued more seriously, we might be looking at a totally different superhero priority list in terms of who's successful, because these guys have been around for 80 years.
It's an interesting question, because clearly Archie, the series, is cheaper to produce than a superhero comic and is more profitable. And with those two combinations, you don't really want to invest all your money in something that is more labor intensive, more expensive, and yields less profit. But to their credit, Archie continues to try and to try and find a different take on them, because clearly the Impact line was designed to be a young heroes launch. At the same time, Image was launching an older, more mature readers launch. And Valiant was also very popular at the time and launching for older readers. And so they were, again, trying a different flavor. And then when they did the Dark Circle launch, they tried to tap into the older readers and to do a more mature version. And certainly the Black Hood, which was very successful in their run, was he was a drug addict and a police officer. And so that was a much more mature take on the character. But as they're doing that, they're also having success with the Fox, which was much more comedic, a lot of fun, and it highlighted a lot of the minor MLJ characters. So
yeah, I think one of the things I like about that is it brought the Toth Fox stories back to
the Alex
back to people's minds.
You know, the funny thing about what you just said, Jeff, is I had to look at a lot of those 1940s MLJ stories, because I was researching and editing the Archie Americana series for all those years. So I was always consulting the bound volumes to find Archie stories to reprint. But of course, a lot of that was looking through issues of Pep and Jackpot and different things like that, where I would see the superheroes. And interestingly enough, if you think about it, and like I said, a lot of those 40 stories were, even by today's standards, they'd be double mature. You know, some of them were just rough. And so Archie's popularity in the 40s, you know, became such a juggernaut that's what ended up, you know, canceling the superheroes by and large in Archie, or at least postponing them. But if that hadn't happened first, they surely would have been obliterated by the the formation of the Comics Code Authority.
Oh, sure.
They would have been just jettisoned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And societal trends too. You look at what Timely and then DC went through, with only DC's big three surviving at any for quite a period, and little dribs and drabs of the superheroes from then Atlas, but
they only got Captain America and the Human Torch out at Timely for the Atlas issues, and that failed for them too. And so at that particular moment in history, Archie was more successful with the launch of Private Strong and
sure. If anything, Marvel was putting out in that era failed humor comics, as well as whatever other things, what other trends were happening at the time. They were interestingly the antithesis of an industry leader at that time.
Yeah, the launch of the Silver Age to me is always not just DC and Showcase. It's also what Archie was doing with Private Strong on the Fly is part of that. And really predates the Marvel explosion.
Yeah, and one of the things that we on the Overstreet side, one of the things that we sort of tried to make clear is there's not a date for the start of the Silver Age. It's a period of years.
Right.
Well, it's not like, Showcase came out and all of a sudden everyone was producing superhero comics and everyone was buying them.
Right.
It was a slow start. And of course, that's why they launched with Showcase instead of launching with a whole line of superheroes.
Yep.
Everyone was nervous. They hadn't sold well in a long time. But, everywhere they were still trying, and there were a lot of failed universes at that time. And Jeff, you know a little bit about that.
I do. I'm thanks for that sly plug. Our book that comes out in November is the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide to Lost Universes. And we're going to hit on original Valiant, original Milestone, the Thunder Agents, the Ditko era Charlton superheroes, which had some, continuity, and the New Universe and the Ultraverse and Comics Greatest World. But we're also having a really good focus by Rik and Paul on Mighty Crusaders. And I think one of the great things about this is there's built-in frustration in collecting this stuff. It ends. You're always going to want the next issue. What if they had just done this? What if they had continued this? I think the best taste of this I had is when Dick Giordano and Bob Layden and David Michelinie had done Future Comics. They all ended abruptly. And within the last couple of years, you've been able to get print-on-demand issues of the next issues of a couple of those books from their publisher, Skip Farrell. And I got them, and it was the exact same thing. It's that bittersweet moment of, oh, there's more. And then you still want more. And so I was glowingly talking about the Impact Black Hood. And to me, that's always a thing. Like, I just want the next issue. What would happen if I got it? I want the next issue. But the great thing about Lost Universes is, to me, that it is finite. You can collect the whole thing. And that's a rare thing in our comic collecting world, where you've got, if you're a superhero fan, generally it's like, continue next issue. So you can put these finite things together. You can become a subject matter expert if you're passionate enough. And I'm rambling because I'm just so enthusiastic about it. And I think the book's going to be a lot of fun. And unlike the traditional price guide, it's also a photo journal. We'll have all of the books covered in it will be pictured.
Very good. Yeah. Impact ended when they were going to start with phase 2 at Crucible. And then at the very end, Michael Silverplate pulled the plug because he didn't like the direction they were taking the characters. But those first issues were fully drawn, fully lettered, and were just needing to be colored. And when on my website, mightycrusaders.net, the unpublished first issues are there for anyone who wants to read them in black and white. Bradley Cobb, who had done MLJ.com, MightyMLJ.com years ago, had got the photocopies from Mark Waid, who wrote it. And
Mark was the editor of that line, is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. Priest was the editor on that.
Okay, so I know Mark was one of the writers.
Yes, he was.
And he also has a great comics historian mindset too. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so if anyone wants to see what might have been from one of the launches that might have been, you can go take a look at that. Those are free. There are no print-on-demand versions, but you can read it online for free. Jason is working on a fan film of the Mighty Crusaders, and it's been in production for a little while. Jason, you want to tell us about the fan?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was introduced to the characters through the Impact line because I was, a young teenager at the time that those came out. And before I even get into the fan film, to you guys' point about always wanting that next issue and always wanting to get the next thing. To anyone out there who is a new fan or just discovering the characters now for the first time, if you latch onto them like any of us have, there's always the next issue in a back issue bin. I mean, I have not been able to get anything from the Golden Age era, but I think I've gone back and gotten everything from just about issue 4 or 5 of The Fly, I think is the earliest I've got, and on. So there is, in a sense, always another issue out there. But
absolutely.
But yeah, so the fan film, I this all came up. I was working on a fan film for a friend of mine, Wyatt Weed, who did a fan film based on the first issue of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. Nice. And he and I have done a lot of films together, and we were talking about fan films, and I said, I would love to see a fan film on any of the Mighty Crusaders characters at some point in time. And I started looking online, and there wasn't one. I couldn't find one. And so I said, well, I've got all the equipment. I'm a filmmaker. This is what I do. And I'm obsessed with the Mighty Crusaders in what some would maybe call an unhealthy way. I don't know. So I thought, well, fine. I'm just gonna do it, a 30 to 40 minute film. And so what we've done is we've kind of scoured through the entire history of the Crusaders, and we've taken the things from different eras that have worked and kind of put it together. So this isn't a fan film that's based on any one particular iteration. We're kind of picking and choosing and then seeing what can work within the budget. I mean, when you're doing low to no budget filmmaking, it's do what you can. But yeah, it's exciting. We've had a few setbacks with the film. We've had a few cast members who have gone in and out of the hospital over time. We wanted to have this film done a year ago, and then this little thing called COVID hit.
Oh, that.
Yeah, and that obviously shut down production for a little while. But I am happy to say that everyone on the production team is double vaxxed now, and as of the time when you guys are actually watching this, we have resumed production, and we're even at this point we're about a third of the way through. We've shot I would say about 3 of the 7 scenes, and have I think about half costumes built and that. So we're it's exciting to finally be able to get back to it and get this thing made.
Did you base it on any particular comic book issue, or did you come up with an original story?
No, it's an original story. Surprisingly enough, because he has so few appearances in any of the launches over the years, I'm a fan of Bob Phantom. I don't know what it is about Bob Phantom and the character of Walter Whitney, but I'm a fan of that character, and so he's actually the focal character of this story. We're using him and playing off of the fact that the Crusaders, as Rik said earlier, they always come back every decade. There's always another attempt. And so we're kind of playing off of that fact. This is a story where they have been missing for 30 years, and now they're coming back. And he's an older, retired hero at this point, and now working as a PI. He's investigating the situation, and so.
Well, I understand your obsession with Bob Phantom, because I was always obsessed with Blackjack, and people they would scratch their heads when I was writing Archie's Weird Mysteries. I got to insert the Mighty Crusaders a few times, and I always made Blackjack the focal point. And there would be fan letters like, "Is Blackjack leading the Mighty Crusaders now? What's going on? Why is there all this Blackjack?" And I just always loved it, so I totally understand.
Blackjack is a favorite of mine too, and character, some of those, I guess what you would call the B level characters, I suppose, in the Archie world, like Blackjack. We'd like to include some of them. I'm not sure how many of them we will include. I can say that you will see the major characters, even if they don't all have a speaking line. you will see the major characters in the film.
Now, Bob Phantom is famous for not having pants. It was an era in the 40s where a lot of people didn't have pants. How did you explain this to the actor that,
Well, because he's a PI, he's wearing a full suit, so he's okay with that.
Pantless PI.
Just in the flashback scenes, eh?
That's great.
So when is the film coming out approximately?
We are hoping that the film will be out at the end of 2021, maybe early 2022. You know, as I said, low budget to no budget filmmaking, you have your own set of difficulties just to begin with. But you know, we've done quite a few features. We've got our own production company here in the Midwest, here in the St. Louis area, and so you know, this is kind of what we do. So hopefully, as long as locations hold out and schedulings hold out, and we're able to get it all shot by early fall, then hopefully we'll be able to release the film the end of this year, early next year. And you can find out more information. I mean, we're all over social media. The film is called The Red Circle Investigations, a Mighty Crusaders fan film. Yeah, thank you. And so we've got social media presence for the film. Our production company is called Archlight Entertainment. And if you go to archlightentertainment.com, there's always updated news there. And my own little shameless plug for a podcast that I'm a member of called My Big Fat Pull List. We talk about the Crusaders there a lot. And as steam picks up on the film, we will start talking about it on there as well. So there's a lot of different outlets for people to find information on when the film will be released and how the progress is going.
Very good. Thank you. The Mighty Crusaders have always been near and dear to my heart. And, you know, I've loved actually every type of version they've done of the characters, no matter how different. We were touching on the web as the henpecked hero. And I think that was an original take. That was a new idea where, you know, because being henpecked by your wife is less than heroic. And yet he's the superhero. And then she's kind of an interesting character too, because Rosie becomes Pow Girl, and then Pow Girl retroactively becomes the sister of the Jaguar. And so you tend to think that, you know, if her brother's a superhero too, and she becomes a superhero, why on earth was she henpecking him in the first place?
And so you know what, the whole story out of that.
Rick, yeah. you touched on something there, which is with the different takes and the firsts. You talk about first henpecked superhero, and I think that's absolutely the case. And you know, we talk about it a lot, but let's not mention the Shield being the first of the patriotic heroes. I mean, that's a standout. And you know, I'm Captain America's my #1 character, so you talk to a lot of people about that, and they're still mystified when you tell them no, Shield was first.
Well, that's rampant throughout all of it. I mean, you know, the Comet being, you know, I mean, that's the first time.
I was just going to mention the Comet.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a staple now to kill and bring back a superhero in comics, but yet, you know, once again, these are the characters that blaze that trail.
Yeah. Well, the Comet and Hangman were brothers, and that was a new concept too. The first comic book crossover happened in MLJ Comics too, where it wasn't a crossover of the superheroes, but it was a crossover of the story, where the villain starts off in one strip and then ends the story in another strip. So they had tried things that other people hadn't tried. They were always looking for a different hook. And you know, the fact that we're talking about it 80 years after they created the characters means that they were successful to a degree. The fact that they don't have an 80-year ongoing series that's on issue 700, like, you know, or 1,000, you know, is the tragedy that the series constantly keep restarting. But one of the things that's real nice about the characters is there've been so many different iterations of the characters that they're very flexible. And so they can bring them back and retool them for a modern audience. And there's no one out there saying that's not the right version. There's actually a version for everyone.
You mentioned the Dark Circle version of Black Hood, and it being grittier and definitely skewing toward adults, while the Impact one was skewing toward a younger or more all ages readership. I think that I don't find either of those two violate the basic premise of the character. And I think that it's really representative that there's a lot of leeway in some of this stuff, and you take the basics of it and you can do it. I mean, you know, like the 80s was just super accessible to me. It was like, it read like really good standard superhero fare. The impact is, you know, trying to get in young readers. This was aimed at mainly, I'd say mainly, it was a crime book, you know.
Yes.
And
100%.
and I love, and I like all of them, and I think that's a great, as a, you know, when you want to come in as a creator, to come into something, you go, this is fertile ground, you know, I can put my stamp on this and not violate the character.
That's a great point. When we were starting to write the first draft for the fan film, and we were looking at all the different iterations that were out there, that was the one thing that I kept talking to the team. I said, you know, we can change things where we want to or where we need to, because there is no one iteration, but we do still have to keep the core essence of each character. The central basic idea still has to be there. We can't alter that.
Yeah.
And as long as that is still intact, then yeah, you can do whatever you want with these characters and really, you know, capture a whole new audience each time.
I think the seeds for the modern day stuff, especially Black Hood, you could see that. And Rick, I'm going to need your help here because I'm having a memory short circuit here. There was the Black Hood that was going to be its own series, which I think ended up leading into Red Circle, and then they put it in the digest. You know what I'm talking about?
Well,
right,
that's the
was
John.
who's
John
the artist on
Cavanero.
that again?
Yeah, John
Paro,
Cavanero.
right? Yeah, it was Jim
Yeah.
Paro stuff.
Yeah, he was going to. He was doing JC Comics, and he was doing the Thunder Agents, and he had in the early days of the direct market, he had Archie printing and distributing for him. And so that's where the 80s launch of the Red Circle came. They hired him to redo the Red Circle line. And then he got in a fight with Richard Goldwater over deadlines and issues
Right.
like that. And that's
I had a
where they
brain
brought in
freeze.
Richard
I had a brain freeze on Jim's name, but like,
Yeah.
he was always one of my favorite Batman artists and Spectre and the Phantom. So to put him on Black Hood and really do a more serious take on it, like, I think that's like a really major seed leading to these modern incarnations.
Well, I mean, there's so many different versions of these characters. You could really do, you know, a fun story where you hunt and peck the different versions and put them all together. With the last miniseries, they introduced a concept called the Blue Ribbon, where they showed that Mr. Justice had tied all the different versions from the different decades together. And it's nice that Archie doesn't reboot and erase. You know, Marvel tried to hide their Golden Age heritage with nothing that, you know, as they reintroduced the characters, it was, you know, what's in canon is what happened in the Invaders. It's not really what happened in the Golden Age. And
Right.
DC reboots every 10 years or less. And starts over with the new.
Oh, if you look back at their explanation of the 1950s incarnation of Cap, you know, they absolutely make him an imposter,
right?
You know, so
yeah, that Blue Ribbon concept though, that's
really strong.
It's a great concept, and that was, you know, before the Rob Liefeld announcement. You know, I was saying I was working on a proposal and I was building off of that idea, because I think the great idea about that is that it's not a restart in their mind the way that DC and everything is. It's everything is there. It's all happened. It's all still live, and therefore, if anybody wants to, they can go back and revisit any one of those eras and see where those characters have gone since. And that's something that you don't get a lot with a lot of superhero books these days.
Yeah, DC's trying that now with their DC Infinite. But again, this is an idea that Archie put forth, that all of their versions are live and accurate at first, and then another publisher's coming along and tapping into it. You know, there are just so many firsts at Archie. And, you know, I don't know that before Private Strong came along that you have a whole lot of reboots of a character where, you know, they've thrown basically everything out except the name and the colors. I mean, they certainly did that with Flash. But you got this happening in the 50s at Archie.
Yep.
And you know, that was a real strong launch at a time when it was, you know, the heroes were definitely not in vogue. And if you look at 50s Batman was quite humorous, you know, especially with the comic code, with the Rainbow Batman and, you know, everything going on over there.
That might.
Yes.
Composite, yeah.
But, you know, I'm real happy that all of you could join us for this conversation. These characters are near and dear to my heart and have been, sadly now, for 40 years. It's been a long time to wait and see them really take off. I had, as I said, I got in with the Red Circle line, and I had, in the Overstreet price guide, I had seen the Private Strong version of the Shield. And something really attracted me to the Jack Kirby version. And eventually, as an adult, I was able to go back and purchase them. But, you know, they were very expensive when I was a kid. They're still very expensive relatively, no matter how you look at them. But when they did the Red Circle version, there was the Jack Kirby version of the Shield with the Irv Novak version of the Shield. And I immediately got that. That was the Golden Age Flash and the Silver Age Flash to me. And it was fun, and there was a whole history, and they put that history on the front page as they did a historical recap of who the characters were and where they came from. And it was a big service to me because it started down a whole line of fandom. And it's finite that you can actually own all of this. And, you know, and I've certainly gone back and collected these and been fortunate enough to see all of them before they got so unbelievably expensive that, you know, modernly it would be very difficult to buy some of these older appearances.
I've got to say, you know, my introduction to the, other than being aware of the character of the Golden Age Shield stuff, was the great collection of them that Bob Overstreet did the forward for, and I edited his forward, so that's why I sat down and read the stories to make sure he covered what he wanted, and that was my introduction to it. And I've always got a copy of that trade somewhere, even if you have to hunt for it. It's worth tracking down.
I put that one together. Even if I didn't put it together, I would think it's great. I mean, I'm trying to be modest here, but it's just so fun to read those earliest Shield stories. And you know, you had another first was they had a story where Pearl Harbor was getting attacked before Pearl Harbor actually got attacked.
Yep.
So not that's probably not the kind of first you want, but still it's an interesting historical.
It's weird. Comics, I know we're running out of time here, but Comics has a great connection to that. Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, the guy who created DC Comics, wrote about that in print well before it ever happened. And so Comics has a great connection to seeing that you know, that something was going to happen.
Yeah, I guess they were tapping in the writers of the stories. But those stories are just so great. And those are part of the stories that Rik mentioned that crossed over, because they were crossing over with the Wizard.
Yeah,
some of those stories. So,
and when you're talking about the Shield trade paperback that Archie put out, that you were editing on, that led to another attempted relaunch too, because the cover on that was by Mark Heike from AC Comics, and they're big fans of the Golden Age heroes too, and they do a variety of Golden Age reprints. And they put together their own comic that they submitted as a launch for the Mighty Crusaders. And Archie passed on that, but so they retooled it and just redrew the characters and you know, put it out as their own comic. But
yeah, you know, Archie was passing a lot when I was there. You know, everything that came in, I loved it. I wanted it to happen, but you know, I wasn't the person who controlled the finances and marketing decisions, and So a lot of things, I saw a lot of things come through that got passed. I was even working at one point on stuff with Jim Valentino to try to launch versions, and we were talking about gender swaps and things at that time in the 90s, things that are common now, but maybe not so much then. But yeah, it definitely has a history. But for a lot of those years, it was just a business decision. Archie would always come down to, well, we know we're going to succeed with digests, so let's make sure we put a lot of our resources behind digests and what we do best. They would get cold feet, and I understood that. Eventually that shifted.
Well, they have done superhero digests, and I want to maybe we should address that part too. Is that Archie had a huge digest business, and that's really been a major focus for the company, because those are the only things you find on sale at grocery stores everywhere across the country. You can't go to a grocery store checkout and not see Archie Comics, and they have them at Walmart, and they have them everywhere. And they have tried to put the superheroes in 2 different superhero digests, and then they've tried to include them in, as parts of the stories and the reprints in the digest. And the thinking at Archie is that at that small level, the great detail put into the superhero comics kind of gets muddy, and the fans don't appreciate them because they already started up, as larger drawings, and they reduced them into the comics, it's comic size. And the Golden Age stuff was double up. And,
well, that's a big issue with lettering. So that's why you haven't seen a lot of DC and Marvel digest over the years, because their lettering is smaller. Archie lettering is bigger to start with. And also, you were forbidden from using the word flick, F-L-I-C-K, in any Archie story, because when it got reprinted as a digest,
it didn't look like
the L and the I would form a U. And the rest. That's true. That's absolutely true.
And DC had tried digests at one point too, because they had the DC Blue Ribbon digests, and that was short-lived. It wasn't a format that worked out well. And I think that everyone's trying to play to their strengths, and so the digest wasn't a viable format. And so as fans of these characters, you always hope that the next launch will be the big one that pushes them over. And certainly with all the press that Rob Liefeld coming to the Mighty Crusaders, and even the press, Rob Liefeld leaving the Mighty Crusaders, you hope will drive people to pick up that first issue, that there'll be decent sales on the first issue, that people will enjoy what they see, and this will spring new life into the characters yet again. And so as you're watching this, it's just one comic right now. It's the Mighty Crusaders Shield. It's in the shelves at your local comic store. If you actually happen to get to a comic convention, I'm sure it will be there too. And please pick up a copy, take a look at it, good, bad. It is the latest version of these characters. And we're real excited to see them in print again. And this is our full support. So
yeah, absolutely. Go out and get that book.
And everybody watch Jason's film once it's available to be viewed.
Yeah, and show it to people that don't know the characters. One of the other things that we want out of this film is we want to build that next generation. Like I said, I was in my early teens when I discovered the characters, 25, 30 years ago. And, the only way that these characters and comics in general continue coming out is by finding new audiences in every generation. So, get it out there, or buy it for your nephew or your niece or whoever.
Okay, I got a question just before we wrap this up about fan films in general, because I don't fully understand how this works. I mean, they're Batman fan films, they're X-Men fan films, and this is the first Mighty Crusaders fan film. How do you make a film with an IP you don't own without a license? And how do you ever recoup any of these expenses? Because you got props, you got sets, you got actors from doing all of this. It's all a big mystery to me.
You don't recoup it, is what you do. Technically, there are fan films out there that people do get paid on. They do try to recoup finances in some way that's very illegal and just morally reprehensible. I think I don't. That's not something that we're doing. We've got a full professional production team. We've got professional actors. Everyone is donating their time. No one's getting paid on this. It's all in our spare time. It's all in our free time. When the film goes out, it's going to be released for free on YouTube. There will never be any financial gain from the film. That's not what this is about. This is not about trying to fill our pockets in any way, and it's not about trying to further anybody's career or anything. This is about a group of people who love a particular property and want to share it. And I think in cases like that, fan films are absolutely I don't want to say essential, but certainly helpful to have out there, because it just helps propagate the fan base. But
it helps fan the flames, man.
Absolutely. But anytime you try to make any kind of financial gain off of it, that's
no. I mean, the best you could do with that is it's a portfolio piece. You've got a job.
Yeah. And for us, like I said, we have our own company. We produce our own films, features already that we are very successful with at festivals and what have you. So for us, it isn't even about that. For us, it's about our obsession with these characters.
Nice.
Cool. How long is the film going to run? Just out of curiosity, what's the running time on that?
I'm hoping we'll come in around 45 minutes, so just shy of a technical feature. But it just depends on how the editing pans out.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you all for joining us for the panel. If you want to know more about the Mighty Crusaders, I've got a website, mightycrusaders.net. And I've collected over the course of, we started, I guess, in 2003. So over the course of almost 20 years, chronographing and collecting all the data and different iterations of the characters. That was the basis of the stuff that I'd used for the outline for the book we wrote. And certainly still available online, still available from Amazon, still available from Tomorrow's Publishing, is the MLJ Companion. If you want to know more about the characters, you can pick up the book. In comic shops now is the Shield from Archie Comics. Pick that up as well. Any parting words, Jason?
Nothing from me. Go out and learn all you can about the Mighty Crusaders. Buy the books, dig through the bins, find podcasts that talk about them. Just, if you don't know them, you're in for a treat.
All right. Paul, any parting words?
Yeah, just read comics. Read them, crease the pages, roll them up, put them in your back pocket. Sorry, collectors. I'm a reader guy. Read the comics, learn the characters, enjoy the arts, have fun with it.
Yeah.
That's always my big message. So enjoy comics.
JC?
The Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide, number 51, will be out about the time people are seeing this. We traditionally come out the first day of San Diego. So I'm looking forward to that. Well, because it ate my brain for the last 3 weeks, and now it's at press. So that is great. We've got, as I mentioned, the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide to Lost Universes, which I'm really excited about, will be in November. And in between now and then, if anybody's interested, my first novel just came out. By the time people see this, it'll be available. Actually, it'll be available just a few weeks from when we're recording this. And I got to say, Crusaders, the more you discover, the more you're going to want to know.
Well, thank you all for being here. This is always a fun topic for me. I hope you all had a good time, and I hope all the viewers had a good time. And so we hope to do this again with you sometime soon. Thank you very much.
In person.
Thank you, Rik.
Yes, in person.
Thank you.